Yeah, hi there. These comments are for Mana. This is Michael, the founder, owner, and the materials writer for all of your lessons at the 7-step system to pass the TOEFL IBT. And you sent me a message on Christmas Eve, and I'm going to take some time to answer it right now. So you say, hey Michael, you are an amazing teacher. Well, when I was studying the reading section, I came across lesson 19, understanding organizational patterns, and I couldn't exactly understand what the purpose of this lesson was, or how I can identify the question styles. Would you please explain or simplify it to me? Yes, I will. Now, I think if we go back to the lesson, I think one of the first questions is, why do you need to understand how a reading passage is organized, right? That's probably one of your first questions. And we know that writers can organize using a whole bunch of different organizational patterns. For example, process analysis, division, classification, compare and contrast, example and illustration, cause effect, even argument. These are different ways that writers can organize reading passages. The reason that this is important is, let's talk about reading first of all. There's two types of questions that are a little bit difficult for some students, and I should tell you these questions are both what I call multi-point questions, maybe worth up to 3 points for each question. These are called completing charts or schematic tables. Now, what it means is you have to read the passage, and then it'll ask you to either complete a chart or to put things into a certain category. So if you understand, for example, that the reading passage is cause-effect, and it's mentioning the cause maybe in the thesis, in the very beginning of the reading passage, and then it has the effects of that, in the rest of the reading passage, it'll be much easier for you in your note-taking, I think, if you understand how that reading passage is organized. On the other hand, maybe it might be using the reading passage, might be using what's called classification or division. So it takes an idea and it puts it into maybe 3 categories. During the TOEFL reading, it'll ask you to place that information in those charts into those specific categories. So the purpose of the lesson that you're reading, that you're seeing, that you have a question about, is to show you examples of different reading passages that reflect a certain organization. Okay, so let's take a look at maybe 3 of them. So number 1, this one is an example of argument. Okay, so it says an Indian father's plea by Medicine Grizzly Bear Lake. This is called argument type organization. Now the question is, if you click on the link to read the passage, if you understand it as an argument, then the first question is, in your note-taking when you're reading this, is what is the writer's thesis? What argument is the writer trying to make? And then how does the writer support that particular argument? You see what I'm saying? So then in your note-taking, and you should use note-taking during the reading, I think during the reading part of the test, and also during the integrated writing section, in which case you also need to read a passage. So what you have to do is say, okay, the writer is arguing this idea. And then you say, well, how does the writer support that argument, in the rest of the reading passage? What is the evidence that the writer uses to help support the argument that the writer is actually making? Okay, let's go to number 2. So each of these reading passages that I put in this particular lesson, they show you different organizational patterns that writers use. So number 2, it says Grant and Lee, A Study in Contrast by Bruce Gaughton. The question here is, what type of organizational pattern is the writer using here? And in this case, it's using compare and contrast. So again, what is being compared and contrasted? So the main thing is, you can now categorize, I think, Lee and also Grant, and you can take a sheet of paper, you can draw a line through the paper, you can put the one general on the one hand, Grant, and you can put all of the characteristics about him. Then you can put the other about Lee and all the characteristics associated with Lee, and then you can begin to compare these two generals. Are they more similar or are they more different? Now, so far with the first two reading passages, we've identified reading passages using argument and also reading passages using compare and contrast. Now, in addition to seeing these organizational patterns during the reading section of the test on the TOEFL, MANA, it's also very likely that you will see during the integrated writing, you will see really both of these. You'll see what's called compare and contrast or argument. So typically with an integrated writing task, the reading passage will make 3 points about a topic. 3 specific ideas, 3 things. And then the lecture will have 3 counterpoints to those ideas, differences, either disagreements or showing how they're different or something like that. So if you're familiar, I think, with argument and compare and contrast type organizational reading patterns, and you can also identify them in lectures, I think it'll be much easier for you during the TOEFL IBT, I think, to answer questions during the reading section and also during the writing section of the test. So what you can do in this lesson, I think, MANA, which would be very useful, is to go ahead and read the different passages. I think I included 6 different articles in this lesson. So the first thing is you want to read the articles and then make a quick outline. Make an outline of what the main points of the article are. And then based on your outline, see if you can figure out what type of organizational pattern the writer's actually using. Now, once you've looked at the bottom of my lesson and you see the answers, for example, if number 1, instead of putting argument, if you put, let's say, definition, for example, then the question is, why is it more argument than it is definition? You see what I'm saying? So I hope I've given you some more ideas on how to think about this particular lesson. So the whole purpose of lesson number 19 is to get you used to recognizing different kinds of organizational patterns that you will very likely see during the TOEFL IBT. Now, to kind of give you an idea, I would say probably during the TOEFL test, cause-effect, argument, compare and contrast, maybe classification and division would be very, very likely type organizational patterns that you will see during the test. So the more familiar you become now as a reader with these organizational patterns, I think the easier it will be for you when you're completing the TOEFL IBT exam. Even during the listening, for example, if the speaker is trying to make some kind of argument or comparing, two concepts from an academic class, or classifying or dividing things into specific categories. So those are all things I think will be very useful for you to know, I think, during either the listening, the reading, or the writing section of the test. Alright? Anyway, so I hope I've given you some ideas to answer your question a little bit better. And happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and thank you for your question.